Well, good evening. It's Wednesday, it's 6 o'clock, and this is Tales and Cocktails. All right, this evening, my dears, I have a story for you by Aldous Huxley. He was born in 1894, died in 1963 on November 22nd, just as did JFK and C.S. Lewis of the Narnia Chronicles. That's a date that is very, very potent. Now, I want to give you some quotes. First of all, when asked what was most important in living the life of spirit, he replied, just to be a little kinder. And some other quotes of his, facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Maybe this world is another planet's hell. The spirit of genius is to carry the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. And experience is not what happens to a man, it is what a man does with what happens to him. Now, apart from Brave New World, other books were Point, Counterpoint, and The Doors of Perception. But this evening, I'm going to read a short story by Aldous Huxley entitled The Gioconda Smile. Miss Spence will be down directly, sir. Thank you, said Mr. Hutton, without turning round. Janet Spence's parlor maid was so ugly on purpose, it always seemed to him, malignantly, criminally ugly, that he could not bear to look at her more than was necessary. The door closed. Left to himself, Mr. Hutton got up and began to wander round the room, looking with meditative eyes at the familiar objects it contained. Photographs of Greek statuary, photographs of the Roman Forum, colored prints of Italian masterpieces, all very safe and well known. Poor dear Janet, what a prig, what an intellectual snob. Her real taste was illustrated in that watercolor by the pavement artist, the one she had paid £0.50 for, and 35 shillings for the frame. How often he had heard her tell the story, how often expatiated on the beauties of that skillful imitation of an oleograph, a real artist's in the streets. And you could hear the capital A in artist as she spoke the words. She made you feel that part of his glory had entered into Janet Spence when she tendered him that £0.50 for the copy of the oleograph. She was implying a compliment to her own taste and penetration. A genuine old master for £0.50. Poor dear Janet. Mr. Hutton came to a pause in front of a small oblong mirror. Stooping a little to get a full view of his face, he passed a white, well-manicured finger over his moustache. I don't know what happened there. It was as curly, as freshly auburn as it had been 20 years ago. His hair still retained its color, and there was no sign of baldness yet, only a certain elevation of the brow. Shakespearean, thought Mr. Hutton with a smile, as he surveyed the smooth and polished expanse of his forehead. Others abide our question, thou art free, footsteps in the sea, majesty. Shakespeare, thou shouldst be living at this hour. No, that was Milton, wasn't it? Milton, the Lady of Christ. There was no lady about him. He was what women would call a manly man. That was why they liked him, for the curly auburn moustache and the discreet redolence of tobacco. Mr. Hutton smiled again. He enjoyed making fun of himself. Lady of Christ? No, he was the Christ of ladies. Oh, very pretty, very pretty. The Christ of ladies. Mr. Hutton wished there was somebody he could tell the joke to. Poor dear Janet wouldn't appreciate it, alas. He straightened himself up, parted his hair, and resumed his peregrination. Damn the Roman Forum, he hated those dreary photographs. Suddenly he became aware that Janet Spence was in the room, standing near the door. Mr. Hutton started, as though he had been taking in some felonious act. To make these silent and spectral appearances was one of Janet Spence's peculiar talents. Perhaps she'd been there all the time and seen him looking at himself in the mirror. Impossible. But still, it was disquieting. "Oh, you gave me such a surprise," said Mr. Hutton, recovering his smile and advancing with outstretched hand to meet her. Miss Spence was smiling too, her Gioconda smile, he had once called it, in a moment of half-ironical flattery. Miss Spence had taken the compliment seriously and always tried to live up to the Leonardo standard. She smiled on in silence while Mr. Hutton shook hands. That was part of the Gioconda business. "I hope you're well," said Mr. Hutton. "You look it." What a queer face she had. That small mouth pursed forward by the Gioconda expression into a little snout with a round hole in the middle, as though for whistling. It was like a penholder seen from the front. Above the mouth, a well-shaped nose, finely aquiline. Eyes large, lustrous, and dark, with the largeness, lustre, and darkness that seemed to invite styes and an occasional bloodshot suffusion. They were fine eyes, but unchangeably grave. The penholder might do its Gioconda trick, but the eyes never altered in their earnestness. Above them, a pair of boldly arched, heavily penciled black eyebrows lent a surprising air of power, as of a Roman matron, to the upper portions of the face. Her hair was dark and equally Roman, Agrippina from the brows upwards. "I thought I'd just look in on my way home," Mr. Hutton went on. "Ah, it's good to be back here." He indicated with a wave of his hand the flowers and the vases, the sunshine and greenery beyond the windows. "It's good to be back in the country after a stuffy day of business in town." Miss Spence, who had sat down, pointed to a chair at her side. "No, really, I can't sit down," Mr. Hutton protested. "I must get back to see how poor Emily is. She was rather seedy this morning." He sat down, nevertheless. "It's these wretched liver chills. She's always getting them. Women—" He broke off and coughed, so it hid the fact that he had uttered. He was about to say that women with weak digestions ought not to marry, but the remark was too cruel, and he didn't really believe it. Janet Spence, moreover, was a believer in eternal flames and spiritual attachments. "She hopes to be well enough," he added, "to see you at luncheon tomorrow. Can you come?" "Do," he smiled persuasively. "It's my invitation too, you know." She dropped her eyes, and Mr. Hutton almost thought that he detected a certain reddening of the cheek. It was a tribute. He stroked his mustache. "I should like to come if you think Emily's really well enough to have a visitor." "Of course, you'll do her good. You'll do us both good. In married life, 3 is often better company than 2. "Oh, you're cynical." Mr. Hutton always had a desire to say "bow, wow, wow" whenever that last word was spoken. It irritated him more than any other word in the language. But instead of barking, he made haste to protest. No, I'm only speaking a melancholy truth. Reality doesn't always come up to the ideal, you know. But that doesn't make me believe any the less in the ideal. Indeed, I believe in it passionately. the ideal of a matrimony between two people in perfect accord, I think it's realizable. I'm sure it is." He paused significantly and looked at her with an arch expression. A virgin of 36, but still unwithered, she had her charms, and there was something really rather enigmatic about her. Miss Spence made no reply, but continued to smile. There were times when Mr. Hutton got rather bored with the Gioconda. He stood up. "I must really be going now. Farewell, mysterious Gioconda." The smile grew intenser, focused itself, as it were, in a narrower snout. Mr. Hutton made a Cinquecento gesture and kissed her extended hand. It was the first time he had done such a thing. The action seemed not to be resented. "I look forward to tomorrow." "Do you?" For answer, Mr. Hutton once more kissed her hand, then turned to go. Miss Spence accompanied him to the porch. "Where's your car?" she asked. "I left it at the gate of the drive. I'll come and see you off." "No, no." Mr. Hutton was playful but determined. "You must do no such thing. I simply forbid you." "But I should like to come," Miss Spence protested, throwing a rapid Gioconda at him. Mr. Hutton held up his hand. "No," he repeated, and then with a gesture that was almost the blowing of a kiss, he started to run down the drive lightly on his toes, with long, bounding strides like a boy's. He was proud of that run. It was quite marvelously youthful. Still, he was glad the drive was no longer. At the last bend, before passing out of sight of the house, he halted and turned round. Miss Spence was still standing on the steps, smiling her smile. He waved his hand, and this time quite definitely and overtly wafted a kiss in her direction. Then, breaking once more into his magnificent canter, he rounded the last dark promontory of trees. Once out of sight of the house, he let his high paces decline to a trot and finally to a walk. He took out his handkerchief and began wiping his neck inside his collar. What fools! What fools! Had there ever been such an ass as poor dear Janet Spence? Never, unless it was himself. Decidedly, he was the more malignant fool, since he at least was aware of his folly and still persisted in it. Why did he persist? Ah, the problem that was himself, the problem that was other people. He had reached the gate. A large, prosperous-looking motor was standing at the side of the road. "Home, Nab," the chauffeur touched his cap. "And stop at the crosswords on the way, as usual," Mr. Hutton added, as he opened the door of the car. "Well," he said, speaking into the obscurity that lurked within. "Oh, Teddy Bear, what an age you've been!" It was a fresh and childish voice that spoke the words. There was the faintest hint of Cockney impurity about the vowel sounds. Mr. Hutton bent his large form and darted into the car with the agility of an animal regaining its burrow. "Have I?" he said, as he shut the door. The machine began to move. "You must have missed me a lot if you found the time so long." He sat back in the low seat. A cherishing warmth enveloped him. "Teddy Bear." And with a sigh of contentment, a charming little head declined onto Mr. Hutton's shoulder. Ravished, he looked down sideways at the round, babyish face. "Do you know, Doris, you look like the pictures of Louise de Craye." He passed his fingers through a mass of curly hair. "Who's Louise de Craye, whatever it is?" Doris spoke from remote distances. "She was, alas, fouille." We shall all be was one of these days. Meanwhile, Mr. Hutton covered the baby's face with kisses. The car rushed smoothly along. M'Nab's back through the front window was stonily impassive, the back of a statue. "Your hands," Doris whispered. "Oh, you mustn't touch me. They give me electric shocks." Mr. Hutton adored her for the virgin imbecility of the words. How late in one's existence one makes the discovery of one's body. "The electricity isn't in me, it's in you." He kissed her again, whispering her name several times. "Doris, Doris, Doris." The scientific appellation of the sea mouse, he was thinking, as he kissed the throat she offered him, white and extended like the throat of a victim awaiting the sacrificial knife. The sea mouse was a sausage with iridescent fur, very peculiar. Or was Doris the sea cucumber, which turns itself inside out in moments of alarm? These sea creatures were fabulous, unbelievably fantastic. He must really have to go to Naples again, just to see the aquarium. "Oh, teddy bear." More zoology, but he was only a land animal, his poor little joke. "Teddy bear, I'm so happy." "So am I," said Mr. Hutton. Was it true? "But I wish I knew if it were right. Tell me, teddy bear, is it right or wrong?" My dear, that's just what I've been wondering for the past 30 years. "Be serious, teddy bear. I want to know if this is right. If it's right that I should be here with you, and that we should love one another, and that it should give me electric shocks when you touch me." "Right? Well, it's certainly good that you have electric shocks rather than sexual repressions. Read Freud. Repressions are the devil." "Oh, you don't help me. Why aren't you ever serious? If only you knew how miserable I am sometimes, thinking it's not right. Perhaps, there is a hell and all that. I don't know what to do. Sometimes I think I ought to stop loving you." "But could you?" asked Mr. Hutton, confident in the powers of his seduction and his mustache. "No, teddy bear, you know I couldn't. But I could run away. I could hide from you. I could lock myself up and force myself not to come to you." "Silly little thing." He tightened his embrace. "Oh, dear, I hope it isn't wrong. And there are times when I don't care if it is." Mr. Hutton was touched. He had a certain protective affection for this little creature. He laid his cheek against her hair, and so interlaced they sat in silence, while the car, swaying and pitching a little as it hastened along, seemed to draw in the white road and the dusty hedges towards it devouringly. "Goodbye, goodbye." The car moved on, gathered speed, vanished around a curve, and Doris was left standing by the signpost at the crossroads, still dizzy and weak from the languor born of those kisses and the electrical touch of those gentle hands. She had to take a deep breath to draw herself up deliberately before she was strong enough to start her homeward walk. She had half a mile in which to invent the necessary lies. Alone, Mr. Hutton suddenly found himself the prey of an appalling boredom. Mrs. Hutton was lying on the sofa in her boudoir, playing Patience. In spite of the warmth of the July evening, a wood fire was burning on the hearth. A black Pomeranian, extenuated by the heat and the fatigues of digestion, slept before the blaze. "Phew, isn't it rather hot in here?" Mr. Hutton asked as he entered the room. "You know I have to keep warm, dear." The voice seemed breaking on the verge of tears. "I get so shivery." "I hope you're better this evening." Not much, I'm afraid. The conversation stagnated. Mr. Hutton stood leaning his back against the mantelpiece. He looked down at the Pomeranian lying at his feet, and with the toe of his right boot he rolled the little dog over and rubbed its white-flecked chest and belly. The creature lay in an inert ecstasy. Mrs. Hutton continued to play patience. Arrived at an impasse, she altered the position of one card, took back another, and went on playing. Her patiences always came out. Dr. Libbard thinks I ought to go to Flandrindage Wells this summer. Well, go, my dear, go, most certainly. Mr. Hutton was thinking of the events of the afternoon, how they had driven, Doris and he, up to the hanging wood, had left the car to wait for them under the shade of the trees, and walked together out into the windless sunshine of the chalk down. I'm to drink the waters for my liver, and he thinks I ought to have massage and electric treatment, too. Hat in hand, Doris had stalked 4 blue butterflies that were dancing together round a scabrous flower with a motion that was like the flickering of blue fire. The blue fire burst and scattered into whirling sparks. She had given chase, laughing and shouting like a child. I'm sure it will do you good, my dear. I was wondering if you'd come with me, dear. But you know I'm going to Scotland at the end of the month. Mrs. Hutton looked up at him entreatingly. It's the journey, she said. The thought of it is such a nightmare. I don't know if I can manage it. And you know I can't sleep in hotels. And then there's the luggage and all the worries. I can't go alone. But you won't be alone. You'll have your maid with you. He spoke impatiently. The sick woman was usurping the place of the healthy one. He was being dragged back from the memory of the sunlit down and the quick laughing girl back to this unhealthy, overheated room and its complaining occupant. I don't think I shall be able to go. But you must, my dear, if the doctor tells you to, and besides, a change will do you good. I don't think so. But Libbard thinks so, and he knows what he's talking about. No, I can't face it. I'm too weak. I can't go alone. Mrs. Hutton pulled a handkerchief out of her black silk bag and put it to her eyes. Nonsense, my dear. You must make the effort. I'd rather be left in peace to die here. She was crying in earnest now. Oh, Lord, now do be reasonable. Listen now, please. Mrs. Hutton only sobbed more violently. Oh, what is one to do? He shrugged his shoulders and walked out of the room. Mr. Hutton was aware that he had not behaved with proper patience, but he could not help it. Very early in his manhood he had discovered that not only did he not feel sympathy for the poor, the weak, the diseased, and deformed, he actually hated them. Once, as an undergraduate, he had spent 3 days in a mission in the East End. He had returned filled with a profound and ineradicable disgust. Instead of pitying, he loathed the unfortunate. It was not, he knew, a very comely emotion, and he had been ashamed of it at first. In the end, he had decided that it was temperamental, inevitable, and it felt no further qualms. Emily had been healthy and beautiful when he married her. He had loved her then, but now, was it his fault that she was like this? Mr. Hutton dined alone. Food and drink left him more benevolent than he had been before dinner. To make amends for his show of exasperation, he went up to his wife's room and offered to read to her. She was touched, gratefully accepted the offer, and Mr. Hutton, who was particularly proud of his accent, suggested a little light reading in French. French, I'm so fond of French. Mrs. Hutton spoke of the language of Racine as though it were a dish of green peas. Mr. Hutton ran down to the library and returned with a yellow volume. He began reading. The effect of pronouncing perfectly absorbed his whole attention. But how good his accent was! The fact of its goodness seemed to improve the quality of the novel he was reading. At the end of 15 pages, an unmistakable sound aroused him. He looked up. Mrs. Sutton had gone to sleep. He sat still for a little while, looking with a dispassionate curiosity at the sleeping face. Once it had been beautiful. Once, long ago, the sight of it, the recollection of it, had moved him with an emotion profounder perhaps than any he had felt before or since. Now it was lined and cadaverous. The skin was stretched tightly over the cheekbones, across the bridge of the sharp, bird-like nose. The closed eyes were set in profound, bone-rimmed sockets. The lamplight striking on the face from the side emphasized with light and shade its cavities and projections. It was the face of the dead Christ by Morales. He shivered a little and tiptoed out of the room. On the following day, Mrs. Hutton came down to luncheon. She had had some unpleasant palpitations during the night, but she was feeling better now. Besides, she wanted to do honor to her guest. Miss Spence listened to her complaints about Flandrinded wells and was loud in sympathy, lavish with advice. Whatever she said was always said with intensity. She leaned forward, aimed, so to speak, like a gun, and fired her words. Bang! The charge in her soul was ignited. The words whizzed forth at the narrow barrel of her mouth. She was a machine gun, riddling her host with sympathy. Mr. Hutton had undergone similar bombardments, mostly of a literary or philosophic character, bombardments of Maeterlinck, of Mrs. Besant, of Bergson, of William James. Today, the missiles were medical. She talked about insomnia. She expatiated on the virtues of harmless drugs and beneficent specialists. Under the bombardment, Mrs. Hutton opened out like a flower in the sun. Mr. Hutton looked on in silence. The spectacle of Janet Spence evoked in him an unfailing curiosity. He was not romantic enough to imagine that every face masked an interior physiognomy of beauty or strangeness, that every woman's small talk was like a vapor hanging over mysterious gulfs. His wife, for example, and Doris, they were nothing more than what they seemed to be. But with Janet Spence, it was somehow different. Here one could be sure there was some kind of a queer face behind the Gioconda smile and the Roman eyebrows. The only question was, what exactly was there? Mr. Hutton could never quite make out. But perhaps you won't have to go to Flandrinded after all, Miss Spence was saying. If you get well quickly, Dr. Libbert will let you off. I only hope so. Indeed, I do really feel rather better today. Mr. Hutton felt ashamed. How much was it his own lack of sympathy that prevented her from feeling well every day? But he comforted himself by recollecting that it was only a case of feeling, not of being better. Sympathy does not mend a diseased liver or a weak heart. My dear, I wouldn't eat those red currants if I were you, he said, suddenly solicitous. You know that Libbert has banned everything with skins and pips. But I'm so fond of them, Mrs. Hutton protested, and I feel so well today. Don't be a tyrant, said Miss Spence, looking first at him and then at his wife. Let the poor invalid have what she fancies. It will do her good. She laid her hand on Mrs. Hutton's arm and patted it affectionately 2 or 3 times. Well, don't blame me if they make you ill again. Do I ever blame you, dear? And thank you, my dear. Mrs. Hutton helped herself to the stewed currants. You have nothing to blame me for, Mr. Hutton answered playfully. I am the perfect husband. They sat in the garden after luncheon. From the island of shade under the old cypress tree, they looked out across a flat expanse of lawn in which the parterres of flowers shone with a metallic brilliance. Mr. Hutton took a deep breath of the warm and fragrant air. It's good to be alive, he said. Just to be alive, his wife echoed, stretching one pale, knot-jointed hand into the sunlight. A maid brought the coffee. The silver pots and the little blue cups were set on a folding table near the group of chairs. Oh, my medicine, exclaimed Mrs. Hutton. Run in and fetch it, Clara, will you? The white bottle on the sideboard. I'll go, said Mr. Hutton. I've got to go and fetch a cigar in any case. He ran in towards the house. On the threshold, he turned round for an instant. The maid was walking back across the lawn. His wife was sitting up in her deck chair, engaged in opening her white parasol. Miss Spence was bending over the table, pouring out the coffee. He passed into the cool obscurity of the house. Do you like sugar in your coffee? Miss Spence inquired. Yes, please. Give me rather a lot. I'll drink it after my medicine to take the taste away. Mrs. Hutton leaned back in her chair, lowering the sunshade over her eyes so as to shut out her vision from the burning sky. Behind her, Miss Spence was making a delicate clinking among the coffee cups. I've given you 3 large spoonfuls. That ought to take the taste away. And here comes the medicine. Mr. Hutton had reappeared, carrying a wine glass, half full of a pale liquid. It smells delicious, he said, as he handed it to his wife. That's only the flavoring. She drank it off at a gulp, shuddered, and made a grimace. Ugh, it's so nasty. Give me my coffee. Miss Spence gave her the cup. She sipped at it. You've made it rather like syrup, but it's very nice after that atrocious medicine. At 3:30, Mrs. Hutton complained that she did not feel as well as she had done and went indoors to lie down. Her husband would have said something about the red currants, but checked himself. The triumph of an I told you so was too cheaply won. Instead, he was sympathetic and gave her his arm to the house. A rest will do you good, he said. And by the way, I don't think I shall be back till after dinner. But why? Where are you going? I promised to go to Johnson's this evening. We have to discuss the war memorial, you know. Oh, I wish you weren't going. Mrs. Hutton was almost in tears. Can't you stay? I don't like being alone in the house. But, my dear, I promised weeks ago. It was a bother having to lie like this. And now I must get back and look after Miss Spence. He kissed her on the forehead and went out again into the garden. Miss Spence received him aimed and intense. Your wife is dreadfully ill, she fired off at him. I thought she cheered up so much when you came. That was nervous, purely nervous. I was watching her closely. With a heart in that condition and her digestion wrecked, yes, wrecked, anything might happen. Libbard doesn't take so gloomy a view of poor Emily's health. Mr. Hutton held open the gate that led from the garden into the drive. Miss Spence's car was standing by the front door. Libbard is only a country doctor. You ought to see a specialist. He could not refrain from laughing. You have a macabre passion for specialists. Miss Spence held up her hand in protest. I am serious. I think poor Emily is in a very bad state. Anything might happen at any moment. He handed her into the car and shut the door. The chauffeur started the engine and climbed into his place, ready to drive off. Shall I tell him to start? He had no desire to continue the conversation. Miss Spence leaned forward and shot a Gioconda in his direction. Remember, I expect you to come and see me again soon. Mechanically, he grinned, made a polite noise, and as the car moved forward, waved his hand. He was happy to be alone. A few minutes afterwards, Mr. Sutton himself drove away. Doris was waiting at the crossroads. They dined together 20 miles from home at a roadside hotel. It was one of those bad, expensive meals which are only cooked in country hotels frequented by motorists. It revolted Mr. Hutton, but Doris enjoyed it. She always enjoyed things. Mr. Hutton ordered a not very good brand of champagne. He was wishing he had spent the evening in his library. When they started homewards, Doris was a little tipsy and extremely affectionate. It was very dark inside the car, but looking forward past the motionless form of Nab, they could see a bright and narrow universe of forms and colors scooped out of the night by the electric headlamps. It was after 11 when Mr. Hutton reached home. Dr. Lippard met him in the hall. He was a small man with delicate hands and well-formed features that were almost feminine. His brown eyes were large and melancholy. He used to waste a great deal of time sitting at the bedside of his patients, looking sadness through those eyes and talking in a sad, low voice about nothing in particular. His person exhaled a pleasing odor, decidedly antiseptic, but at the same time suave and discreetly delicious. "Lippard," said Mr. Hutton in surprise. "You here? Is my wife ill?" "We tried to fetch you earlier," the soft, melancholy voice replied. "It was thought you were at Mr. Johnson's, but they had no news of you there." "No, I was detained. I had a breakdown," Mr. Hutton answered irritably. It was tiresome to be caught out in a lie. "Your wife wanted to see you urgently." "Well, I can go now." Mr. Hutton moved toward the stairs. Dr. Lippard laid a hand on his arm. "I'm afraid it's too late." "Too late?" He began fumbling with his watch. It wouldn't come out of his pocket. "Mrs. Hutton passed away half an hour ago." The voice remained even in its softness. The melancholy of the eyes did not deepen. Mr. Lippard spoke of death as he would speak of a local cricket match. All things were equally vain and equally deplorable. Mr. Hutton found himself thinking of Janet Spence's words. At any moment, she had been extraordinarily right. "What happened?" he asked. "What was the cause?" Dr. Lippard explained. It was heart failure brought on by a violent attack of nausea, caused in its turn by the eating of something of an irritant nature. "Red currants?" Mr. Hutton suggested. "Very likely. It had been too much for the heart. There was chronic valvular disease. Something had collapsed under the strain. It was all over. She could not have suffered much." "It's a pity they should have chosen the day of the Eton and Harrow match for the funeral," old General Grego was saying as he stood, his top hat in his hand, under the shadow of the lich gate, wiping his face with his handkerchief. Mr. Hutton overheard the remark, and with difficulty restrained a desire to inflict grievous bodily harm on the general. You'd have liked to have hit the old brute in the middle of his big red face. Monstrous great mulberry, spotted with meal. Was there no respect for the dead? Did nobody care? In theory, he didn't much care. Let the dead bury their dead. But here at the graveside, he had found himself actually sobbing. Poor Emily. They'd been pretty happy once. Now she was lying at the bottom of a 7-foot hole, and here was Grego complaining that he couldn't go to the Eton and Harrow match. Mr. Hutton looked round at the groups of black figures that were drifting slowly out of the churchyard towards the fleet of cabs and motors assembled in the road outside. Against the brilliant background of the July grass and flowers and foliage, they had a horribly alien and unnatural appearance. It pleased him to think that all these people would soon be dead too. That evening, Mr. Hutton sat up late in his library, reading the life of Milton. There was no particular reason why he should have chosen Milton. It was the book that first came to hand, that was all. It was after midnight when he had finished. He got up from his armchair, unbolted the French windows, and stepped out onto the little paved terrace. The night was quiet and clear. Mr. Hutton looked at the stars and at the holes between them, dropped his eyes to the dim lawns and hueless flowers of the garden, and let them wander over the farther landscape, black and grey under the moon. He began to think with a kind of confused violence. There were the stars, there was Milton. A man can be somehow the peer of stars and light, greatness, nobility, but is there seriously a difference between the noble and the ignoble? Milton, the stars, death, and himself, the soul, the body, the higher and the lower nature. Perhaps there was something in it after all. Milton had a God on his side and righteousness. What had he? Nothing whatever. There were only Doris's little breasts. What was the point of it all? Milton, the stars, death, and Emily in her grave. Doris and himself, always himself. Oh, he was a futile and disgusting being. Everything convinced him of it. It was a solemn moment. He spoke aloud, I will. The sound of his own voice in the darkness was appalling. It seemed to him that he had sworn that infernal oath which binds even the gods. I will. There had been New Year's days and solemn anniversaries in the past when he had felt the same contritions and recorded similar resolutions. They had all thinned away, these resolutions, like smoke, into nothingness. But this was a greater moment, and he had pronounced the more fearful oath. In the future it was to be different. Yes, he would live by reason. He would be industrious. He would curb his appetites. He would devote his life to some good purpose. It was resolved, and it would be so. In practice, he saw himself spending his mornings in agricultural pursuits, riding around with a bailiff, seeing that his land was farmed in the best modern way, silos and artificial manures and continuous cropping and all that. The remainder of the day should be devoted to serious studies. There was that book he had been intending to write for so long, The Effects of Diseases on Civilization. Mr. Hutton went to bed humble and contrite, but with a sense that grace had entered into him. He slept for 7.5 hours and woke to find the sun brilliantly shining. The emotions of the evening before had been transformed by a good night's rest into his customary cheerfulness. It was not until a good many seconds after his return to consciousness that he remembered his resolution, his Stygian oath. Milton and death seemed somehow different in the sunlight. As for the stars, they were not there. But the resolutions were good. Even in the daytime, he could see that. He had his horse saddled after breakfast, and rode round the farm with the bailiff. After luncheon, he read Thucydides on the plague at Athens. In the evening, he made a few notes on malaria in southern Italy. While he was undressing, he remembered that there was a good anecdote in Skelton's jest book about the sweating sickness. He would have made a note of it, if only he could have found a pencil. On the 6th morning of his new life, Mr. Hutton found among his correspondence an envelope addressed in that peculiarly vulgar handwriting which he knew to be Doris's. He opened it and began to read. She didn't know what to say. Words were so inadequate. His wife dying like that, and so suddenly. It was too terrible. Mr. Hutton sighed, but his interest revived somewhat as he read on. Death is so frightening. I never think of it when I can help it. But when something like this happens, or when I'm feeling ill or depressed, then I can't help remembering it is there so close. And I think about all the wicked things I have done, and about you and me, and I wonder what will happen. And I am so frightened. I'm so lonely, Teddy Bear, and so unhappy, and I don't know what to do. I can't get rid of the idea of dying. I'm so wretched and helpless without you. I didn't mean to write to you. I meant to wait till you were out of mourning and could come and see me again. But I was so lonely and miserable, Teddy Bear, I had to write. I couldn't help it. Forgive me, I want you so much. I have nobody in the world but you. You are so good and gentle and understanding. There's nobody like you. I shall never forget how good and kind you have been to me. And you were so clever and know so much. I can't understand how you ever came to pay any attention to me. I am so dull and stupid. Much less like me and love me, because you do love me a little, don't you, Teddy Bear? Mr. Hutton was touched with shame and remorse. To be thanked like this, worshipped for having seduced the girl, it was too much. It had just been a piece of imbecile wantonness. Imbecile, idiotic. There was no other way to describe it. For when all was said, he had derived very little pleasure from it. Taking all things together, he had probably been more bored than amused. Once upon a time, he had believed himself to be a hedonist. But to be a hedonist implies a certain process of reasoning, a deliberate choice of known pleasures, a rejection of known pains. This had been done without reason, against it, for he knew beforehand so well, that there was no interest or pleasure to be derived from these wretched affairs. And yet each time the vague itch came upon him, he succumbed, involving himself once more in the old stupidity. There had been Maggie, his wife's maid, and Edith, the girl on the farm, and Mrs. Pringle, and the waitress in London, and others. There seemed to be dozens of them. It had all been so stale and boring. He knew it would be. He always knew. And yet, experience doesn't teach. Poor little Doris. He would write to her kindly, comfortingly, but he wouldn't see her again. A servant came to tell him that his horse was saddled and waiting. He mounted and rode off. That morning, the old bailiff was more irritating than usual. 5 days later, Doris and Mr. Hutton were sitting together on the pier at Southend. Doris in white muslin with pink garnishes radiated happiness. Mr. Hutton, legs outstretched and chair tilted, had pushed the Panama back from his forehead and was trying to feel like a tripper. That night, when Doris was asleep, breathing and warm by his side, he recaptured in this moment of darkness and physical fatigue the rather cosmic emotion which had possessed him that evening, not a fortnight ago, when he had made his great resolution. And so his solemn oath had already gone the way of so many other resolutions. Unreason had triumphed. At the first itch of desire, he had given way. He was hopeless, hopeless. For a long time he lay with closed eyes, ruminating his humiliation. The girl stirred in her sleep. Miss Houghton turned over and looked in her direction. Enough faint light crept in between the half-drawn curtains to show her bare arm and shoulder, her neck, and the dark tangle of hair on the pillow. She was beautiful, desirable. Why did he lie there moaning over his sins? What did it matter? If he were hopeless, so be it. He would make the best of his hopelessness. A glorious sense of irresponsibility suddenly filled him. He was free, magnificently free. In a kind of exaltation, he drew the girl towards him. She woke, bewildered, almost frightened, under his rough kisses. The storm of his desire subsided into a kind of serene merriment. The whole atmosphere seemed to be quivering with enormous silent laughter. Could anyone love you as much as I do, Teddy Bear? The question came faintly from distant worlds of love. I think I know somebody who does, Mr. Hutton replied. The submarine laughter was swelling, rising, ready to break the surface of silence and resound. Who? Tell me. What do you mean? The voice had come very close, charged with suspicion, anguish, indignation. It belonged to this immediate world. Ah. Who? You'll never guess. Mr. Hutton kept up the joke until it began to grow tedious, and then pronounced the name. Janet Spence. Doris was incredulous. Miss Spence of the Manor? That old woman? It was too ridiculous. Mr. Hutton laughed too. But it's quite true, he said. She adores me. Oh, the vast joke. He would go and see her as soon as he returned. See and conquer. I believe she wants to marry me, he added. But you wouldn't. You don't intend. The air was fairly crepitating with humor. Mr. Hutton laughed aloud. I intend to marry you, he said. It seemed to him the best joke he had ever made in his life. When Mr. Hutton left Southend, he was once more a married man. It was agreed that, for the time being, the fact should be kept secret. In the autumn, they would go abroad together, and the world should be informed. Meanwhile, he was to go back to his own house, and Doris to hers. The day after his return, he walked over in the afternoon to see Miss Spence. She received him with the old Gioconda. I was expecting you to come. I couldn't keep away, Mr. Hutton gallantly replied. They sat in the summer house. It was a pleasant place. A little old stucco temple bowered among dense bushes of evergreen. Miss Spence had left her mark on it by hanging up over the seat a blue and white Della Robbia plaque. I am thinking of going to Italy this autumn, said Mr. Hutton. He felt like a ginger beer bottle, ready to pop with bubbling, humorous excitement. Italy. Miss Spence closed her eyes ecstatically. I feel drawn there, too. Why not let yourself be drawn? I don't know. One somehow hasn't the energy and initiative to set out alone. Alone. Ah, sound of guitars and throaty singing. Yes, traveling alone isn't much fun. Miss Spence lay back in her chair without speaking. Her eyes were still closed. Mr. Hutton stroked his moustache. The silence prolonged itself for what seemed a very long time. Pressed to stay to dinner, Mr. Hutton did not refuse. The fun had hardly started. The table was laid in the loggia. Through its arches, they looked out onto the sloping garden, to the valley below and the farther hills. Light ebbed away. The heat and silence were oppressive. A huge cloud was mounting up the sky, and there were distant breathings of thunder. The thunder drew nearer. A wind began to blow, and the first drops of rain fell. The table was cleared. Miss Spence and Mr. Hutton sat on in the growing darkness. Miss Spence broke a long silence by saying meditatively, "I think everyone has a right to a certain amount of happiness, don't you?" "Most certainly." But what was she leading up to? Nobody makes generalizations about life unless they mean to talk about themselves. Happiness. He looked back on his own life and saw a cheerful, placid existence, disturbed by no great griefs or discomforts or alarms. He had always had money and freedom. He had been able to do very much as he wanted. Yes, he supposed he had been happy, happier than most men. And now he was not merely happy. He had discovered in irresponsibility the secret of gaiety. He was about to say something about his happiness when Miss Spence went on speaking. "People like you and me have a right to be happy sometime in our lives." "Me?" said Mr. Hutton, surprised. "Poor Henry. Fate hasn't treated either of us very well." "Oh, well, it might have treated me worse." "You're being cheerful. That's brave of you. But don't think I can't see behind the mask." Miss Spence spoke louder and louder as the rain came down more and more heavily. Periodically, the thunder cut across her utterances. She talked on, shouting against the noise. "I have understood you so well, and for so long." A flash revealed her, aimed and intent, leaning towards him. Her eyes were two profound and menacing gun barrels. The darkness re-engulfed her. "You are a lonely soul, seeking a companion soul. I could sympathize with you in your solitude. Your marriage—" The thunder cut short the sentence. Miss Spence's voice became audible once more with the words, "could offer no companionship to a man of your stamp. You needed a soulmate." A soulmate? He? A soulmate? It was incredibly fantastic. Georgette Leblanc, the ex-soulmate of Maurice Maeterlinck. He had seen that in the paper a few days ago. So it was thus that Janet Spence had painted him in her imagination as a soulmater. And for Doris, he was a picture of goodness and the cleverest man in the world. And actually, really, he was what? Who knows? "My heart went out to you. I could understand. I was lonely too." Miss Spence laid her hand on his knee. "You were so patient." Another flash. She was still armed, dangerously. "You never complained. But I could guess. How wonderful of you." So he was an âme incomprise. Only a woman's intuition. The thunder crashed and rumbled, died away, and only the sound of the rain was left. The thunder was his laughter, magnified, externalized, flash and crash. There it was again, right on top of them. "Don't you feel that you have within you something that is akin to this storm?" He could imagine her leaning forward as she uttered the words. "Passion makes one the equal of the elements." What was his gambit now? Why, obviously he should have said yes and ventured on some unequivocal gesture, but Mr. Hutton suddenly took fright. The ginger beer in him had gone flat. The woman was serious, terribly serious. He was appalled. "Passion? No," he desperately answered. "I am without passion." But his remark was either unheard or unheeded, as Miss Spence went on with a growing exaltation. speaking so rapidly, however, in such a burningly intimate whisper that Mr. Hutton found it difficult to distinguish what she was saying. She was telling him, as far as he could make out, the story of her life. The lightning was less frequent now, and there were long intervals of darkness, but at each flash he saw her still aiming towards him, still yearning forward with a terrifying intensity. Darkness, the rain, then flash. Her face was there, close at hand. A pale mask, greenish white, the large eyes, the narrow barrel of the mouth, the heavy eyebrows. Agrippina! He began devising absurd plans for escaping. He might suddenly jump up, pretending he'd seen a burglar. "Stop, thief! Stop, thief!" and dash off into the night in pursuit. Or should he say that he felt faint, a heart attack, or that he had seen a ghost, Emily's ghost, in the garden? Absorbed in his childish plotting, he had ceased to pay attention to Miss Spence's words. The spasmodic clutching of her hand recalled his thoughts. "I honored you for that, Henry," she was saying. Honored him for what? Marriage is a sacred tie, and your respect for it, even when the marriage was, as in your case, an unhappy one, made me respect you and admire you, and... Shall I dare say the word? Oh, the burglar, the ghost in the garden, but it was too late. Yes, love you, Henry, all the more. But we're free now, Henry. Free? There was a movement in the dark, and she was kneeling on the floor by his chair. "Oh, Henry, Henry, I have been unhappy too." Her arms embraced him, and by the shaking of her body he could feel that she was sobbing. She might have been a suppliant crying for mercy. "You mustn't, Janet," he protested. Those tears were terrible, terrible. Not now, not now. You must be calm. You must go to bed." He patted her shoulder, then got up, disengaging himself from her embrace. He left her still crouching on the floor beside the chair on which he had been sitting. Groping his way into the hall, and without waiting to look for his hat, he went out of the house, taking infinite pains to close the front door noiselessly behind him. The clouds had blown over, and the moon was shining from a clear sky. There were puddles all along the road, and a noise of running water rose from the gutters and ditches. Mr. Hutton splashed along, not caring if he got wet. How heart-rendingly she had sobbed! With the emotions of pity and remorse that the recollections evoked in him, there was a certain resentment. Why couldn't she have played the game that he was playing? The heartless, amusing game. Yes, but he had known all the time that she wouldn't. She couldn't play that game. He had known and persisted. What had she said about passion and the elements? Something absurdly stale, but true. True. There she was, a cloud, black-bosomed and charged with thunder. And he, like some absurd little Benjamin Franklin, had sent up a kite into the heart of the menace. Now he was complaining that his toy had drawn the lightning. She was probably still kneeling by that chair in the loggia, crying. But why hadn't he been able to keep up the game? Why had his irresponsibility deserted him, leaving him suddenly sober in a cold world? There were no answers to any of his questions. One idea burned steady and luminous in his mind, the idea of flight. He must get away at once. "What are you thinking about, Teddy Bear?" "Nothing." There was a silence. Mr. Hutton remained motionless, his elbows on the parapet of the terrace, his chin in his hands, looking down over Florence. He had taken a villa on one of the hilltops to the south of the city. From a little raised terrace at the end of the garden, One looked down on a long, fertile valley onto the town, and beyond it to the bleak mass of Monte Morello, and eastward of it to the peopled hills of Fiesole, dotted with white houses. Everything was clear and luminous in the September sunshine. "Are you worried about anything?" "No, thank you." "Tell me, Teddy Bear." "But my dear, there's nothing to tell." Mr. Hutton turned round, smiled, and patted the girl's hand. "I think you'd better go in and have your siesta. It's too hot for you here." "Very well, Teddy Bear. Are you coming too?" "When I've finished my cigar." "All right. But do hurry up and finish it, Teddy Bear." Slowly, reluctantly, she descended the steps of the terrace and walked toward the house. Mr. Hutton continued his contemplation of Florence. He had need to be alone. It was good sometimes to escape from Doris and the restless solicitude of her passion. He had never known the pains of loving hopelessly, but he was experiencing now the pains of being loved. These last weeks had been a period of growing discomfort. Doris was always with him, like an obsession, like a guilty conscience. Yes, it was good to be alone. He pulled an envelope out of his pocket and opened it, not without reluctance. He hated letters. They always contained something unpleasant nowadays, since his second marriage. This was from his sister. He began skimming through the insulting home truths of which it was composed. The words indecent haste, social suicide, scarcely cold in her grave, person of the lesser classes, the lower classes, all occurred. They were inevitable now in any communication from a well-meaning and right-thinking relative. Impatient, he was about to tear the stupid letter to pieces when his eyes fell on a sentence at the bottom of the third page. His heart beat with uncomfortable violence as he read it. It was too monstrous. Janet Spence was going about telling everyone that he had poisoned his wife in order to marry Doris. What damnable malice! Ordinarily a man of the suavest temper, Mr. Hutton found himself trembling with rage. He took the childish satisfaction of calling names. He cursed the woman. Then suddenly he saw the ridiculous side of the situation. The notion that he should have married anyone or the notion that he should have murdered anyone in order to marry Doris. If they only knew how miserably bored he was. Poor dear Janet. She had tried to be malicious. She had only succeeded in being stupid. A sound of footsteps aroused him. He looked round. In the garden below the little terrace, the servant girl of the house was picking fruit. A Neapolitan, strayed somehow as far north as Florence. She was a specimen of the classical type, a little debased. Her profile might have been taken from a Sicilian coin of a bad period. Her features, carved floridly in the grand tradition, expressed an almost perfect stupidity. Her mouth was the most beautiful thing about her. The calligraphic hand of nature had richly carved it into an expression of mulish bad temper. Under her hideous black clothes, Mr. Hutton divined a powerful body, firm and massive. He had looked at her before with a vague interest and curiosity. Today, the curiosity defined and focused itself into a desire. An idol of Theocritus. Here was the woman. He, alas, was not precisely like a goatherd on the volcanic hills. He called to her, "Armida." The smile with which she answered him was so provocative, attested so easy a virtue, that Mr. Hutton took fright. He was on the brink once more, on the brink. He must draw back, quickly, quietly, before it was too late. The girl continued to look up at him. "Not your motto?" she asked at last. Stupidity or reason? Oh, there was no choice now. It was imbecility every time. "Scendo," he called back to her. 12 steps led from the garden to the terrace. Mr. Hutton counted them. Down, 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 down. He saw a vision of himself descending from one circle of the inferno to the next, from a darkness full of wind and hail to an abyss of stinking mud. For a good many days, the Hutton case had a place on the front page of every newspaper. There had been no more popular murder trial since George Smith had temporarily eclipsed the European war by drowning in a warm bath his 7th bride. The public imagination was stirred by this tale of a murder brought to light months after the date of the crime. Here, it was felt, was one of those incidents in human life so notable because they are so rare, which do definitely justify the ways of God to man. A wicked man had been moved by an illicit passion to kill his wife. For months he had lived in sin and fancied security, only to be dashed at last more horribly into the pit he had prepared for himself. Murder will out, and here was a case of it. The readers of the newspapers were in a position to follow every movement of the hand of God. There had been vague but persistent rumors in the neighborhood. The police had taken action at last. Then came the exhumation order, the post-mortem examination, the inquest, the evidence of the experts, the verdict of the coroner's jury, the trial, the condemnation. For once, Providence had done its duty, obviously, grossly, didactically, as in a melodrama. The newspapers were right in making the case the staple intellectual food of a whole season. Mr. Hutton's first emotion, when he was summoned from Italy to give evidence at the inquest, was one of indignation. It was a monstrous, a scandalous thing that the police should take such idle, malicious gossip seriously. When the inquest was over, he would bring an action for malicious prosecution against the chief constable. He would sue the Spence woman for slander. The inquest was open. The astonishing evidence unrolled itself. The experts had examined the body and had found traces of arsenic. They were of the opinion that the late Mrs. Hutton had died of arsenic poisoning. Arsenic poisoning? Emily had died of arsenic poisoning? After that, Mr. Hutton learned with surprise that there was enough arsenicated insecticide in his greenhouses to poison an army. It was now quite suddenly that he saw it. There was a case against him. Fascinated, he watched it growing like some monstrous tropical plant. It was enveloping him, surrounding him. He was lost in a tangled forest. When was the poison administered? The experts agreed that it had been swallowed 8 or 9 hours before death. About lunchtime? Yes, about lunchtime. Clara, the parlor maid, was called. Mrs. Hutton, she remembered, had asked her to go and fetch her medicine. Mr. Hutton had volunteered to go instead. He had gone alone. Miss Spence. Ah, the memory of the storm, the white face, the horror of it all. Miss Spence confirmed Clara's statement and added that Mr. Hutton had come back with the medicine already poured out in a wine glass, not in the bottle. Mr. Hutton's indignation evaporated. He was dismayed, frightened. It was all too fantastic to be taken seriously, and yet this nightmare was a fact. It was actually happening. Nab had seen them kissing often. He had taken them for a drive on the day of Mrs. Sutton's death. He could see them reflected in the windscreen, sometimes out of the tail of his eye. The inquest was adjourned. That evening, Doris went to bed with a headache. When he went to her room after dinner, Mr. Hutton found her crying. "What's the matter?" He sat down on the edge of her bed and began to stroke her hair. For a long time she did not answer, and he went on stroking her hair mechanically, almost unconsciously. Sometimes even he bent down and kissed her bare shoulder. He had his own affairs, however, to think about. What had happened? How was it that the stupid gossip had actually come true? Emily had died of arsenic poisoning. It was absurd, impossible. The order of things had been broken, and he was at the mercy of an irresponsibility. What had happened? What was going to happen? He was interrupted in the midst of his thoughts. "It's my fault. It's my fault," Doris suddenly sobbed out. "I shouldn't have loved you. I oughtn't to have let you love me. Why was I ever born?" Mr. Hutton didn't say anything, but looked down in silence at the abject figure of misery lying on the bed. "If they do anything to you, I shall kill myself." She sat up, held him for a moment at arm's length, and looked at him with a kind of violence, as though she were never to see him again. "I love you, I love you, I love you." She drew him, inert and passive, towards her, clasped him, pressed herself against him. "I didn't know you loved me as much as that, teddy bear. But why did you do it? Why did you do it?" Mr. Hutton undid her clasping arms and got up. His face became very red. "You seem to take it for granted that I murdered my wife," he said. "It's really too grotesque. What do you all take me for? A cinema hero?" He had begun to lose his temper. All the exasperation, all the fear and bewilderment of the day was transformed into a violent anger against her. "It's all such damn stupidity. Haven't you any conception of a civilized man's mentality? Do I look the sort of man who'd go about slaughtering people? I suppose you imagined I was so insanely in love with you that I would commit any folly. When will you women understand that one isn't insanely in love? All one asks for is a quiet life, which you won't allow one to have. I don't know what the devil ever induced me to marry you. It was all a damn stupid practical joke. And now you go about saying I'm a murderer. I won't stand for it." Mr. Hutton stamped towards the door. He had said horrible things, he knew, odious things, that he ought speedily to unsay. But he wouldn't. He closed the door behind him. "Teddy bear!" He turned the handle. The latch clicked into place. "Teddy bear!" The voice that came to him through the closed door was agonized. Should he go back? He ought to go back. He touched the handle, then withdrew his fingers and quickly walked away. When he was halfway down the stairs, he halted. She might try to do something silly, throw herself out of the window, or God knows what. He listened attentively. There was no sound, but he pictured her very clearly, tiptoeing across the room, lifting the sash as high as it would go, leaning out into the cold night air. It was raining a little. Under the window lay the paved terrace. How far below? 25 or 30 feet? Once, when he was walking along Piccadilly, a dog had jumped out of a third-story window of the Ritz. He'd seen it fall. He had heard it strike the pavement. Should he go back? He was damned if he would. He hated her. He sat for a long time in the library. What had happened? What was happening? He turned the question over and over in his mind and could find no answer. Suppose the nightmare dreamed itself out to its horrible conclusion. Death was waiting for him. His eyes filled with tears. He wanted so passionately to live, just to be alive. Poor Emily had wished it too, he remembered, just to be alive. There were still so many places in this astonishing world unvisited, so many queer, delightful people still unknown, so many lovely women never so much as seen. The huge white oxen would still be dragging their wains along the Tuscan roads. The cypresses would still go up straight as pillars to the blue heaven, but he would not be there to see them. And the sweet southern wines, tears of Christ and blood of Judas, others would drink them, not he. Others would walk down the obscure and narrow lanes between the bookshelves in the London Library, sniffing the dusty perfume of good literature, peering at strange titles, discovering unknown names, exploring the fringes of vast domains of knowledge. He would be lying in a hole in the ground. And why? Why? Confusedly, he felt that some extraordinary kind of justice was being done. In the past, he had been wanton and imbecile and irresponsible. Now fate was playing as wantonly, as irresponsibly with him. It was tit for tat, and God existed after all. He felt that he would like to pray. 40 years ago, he used to kneel by his bed every evening. The nightly formula of his childhood came to him, almost unsought from some long unopened chamber of the memory. God bless Mother and Father, Tom and Sissy and the baby, Mademoiselle and Nurse and everyone that I love, and make me a good boy. Amen. They were all dead now, all except Sissy. His mind seemed to soften and dissolve. A great calm descended upon his spirit. He went upstairs to ask Doris's forgiveness. He found her lying on the couch at the foot of the bed. On the floor beside her stood a blue bottle of liniment marked "Not to be taken." She seemed to have drunk about half of it. "You didn't love me," was all she said when she opened her eyes to find him bending over her. Dr. Libbet arrived in time to prevent any serious consequences. "You mustn't do this again," he said, while Mr. Hutton was out of the room. "What's to prevent me?" she said defiantly. Dr. Libbet looked at her with his large, sad eyes. "There's nothing to prevent you," he said. "Only yourself and your baby. Isn't it rather bad luck on your baby, not allowing it to come into the world because you want to go out of it?" Doris was silent for a time. "All right," she whispered. "I won't." Mr. Hutton sat by her bedside for the rest of the night. He felt himself now to be indeed a murderer. For a time, he persuaded himself that he loved this pitiable child. Dozing in his chair, he woke up stiff and cold, to find himself drained dry, as it were, of every emotion. He had become nothing but a tired and suffering carcass. At 6 o'clock, he undressed and went to bed for a couple of hours' sleep. In the course of the same afternoon, the coroner's jury brought in a verdict of willful murder, and Mr. Hutton was committed for trial. Miss Spence was not at all well. She had found her public appearances in the witness box very trying, and when it was all over, she had something that was very nearly a breakdown. She slept badly and suffered from nervous indigestion. Dr. Libbet used to call every other day. She talked to him a great deal, mostly about the Hutton case. Her moral indignation was always on the boil. Wasn't it appalling to think that one had had a murderer in one's house? Wasn't it extraordinary that one could have been for so long mistaken about the man's character? But she had had an inkling from the first. And then the girl he had gone off with, so low class, so little better than a prostitute. The news that the second Mrs. Hutton was expecting a baby, the posthumous child of a condemned and executed criminal, revolted her. The thing was shocking, an obscenity. Dr. Libbet answered her gently and vaguely and prescribed bromide. One morning he interrupted her in the midst of her customary tirade. "By the way," he said in his soft, melancholy voice, "I suppose it was really you who poisoned Mrs. Hutton." Miss Spence stared at him for 2 or 3 seconds with enormous eyes, and then quietly said, "Yes." After that, she started to cry. "In the coffee, I suppose?" She seemed to nod assent. Libbet took out his fountain pen, and in his neat, meticulous calligraphy, wrote out a prescription for a sleeping draught. Aldous Huxley, The Gioconda Smile. It's one of the extraordinary short stories. I hope you've enjoyed it, my dears. I apologize for the reading. I didn't sleep well last night, so I put a lot of effort into this, and it got away from me from time to time. And I'm sorry about that because it's such a wonderful story. So anyway, that's it for today, for tonight's Tales and Cocktails. And I look forward to seeing you next week, next Wednesday, at the same time. Thank you for being with me. Bye now.